Well, thanks very much, Ethel. I have to say you're a wonderful chair for the afternoon. You moderated that absolutely wonderfully, in spite of what you were saying to me in the chat. It was wonderful. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So good afternoon. Just let Sue know you're not getting a break. You're hopping straight onto this panel, so no rest for you whatsoever. And just to let you know, I got my hair done yesterday, but absolutely no one's going to notice. So you're all very welcome. I'd like to say thanks to everybody that came along today. Thanks to all the speakers, thanks to all our panelists, but more importantly, thanks to everyone that's attended this presentation, this conference so far. There's a few hundred people online. There's been several hundred on all day. We are very, thank you much for that. The chat has been exploding. We've been overwhelmed, but happily so, with all the engagement of that. There's been loads of questions, so we hope you'll keep the questions coming. So for the next hour, let us say, we're just going to try and have a chat about all the themes that we've been discussing here for this afternoon around education and ND, and maybe try and bring things together. So we've 4 panelists on for now, and I can just see it on screen. And so we do have everybody in there. So we've Sue, Claire, Elaine, and Jess. What I've asked each of them to do is to maybe just give us a couple of minutes at the very start, just outline what they see their positions on the topic is. So the topic for this session is supporting primary and tertiary education settings. And now again, I'm a little bit thinking about this myself, just in terms of defining the theme. I think it's very broad. And so again, go for it, guys. And you've been asked to look at it from primary to tertiary, and your views. In terms of just looking who's going to do this, I was thinking about, doing rock, paper, scissors on screen. Wasn't sure how we do that. Then I was going to use a random number generator. Didn't like that either. Decided to go alphabetically. I then decided after that, about 15 minutes ago, and because Sue, Claire, and Jess have already been on screen, I'd go with Elaine first. And then we give Sue a tiny bit of a break. But just let everyone know before we get going, I do an awful lot of media work here in Ireland. For instance, I had a pre-record on one of the national radios. I'm on television in the morning. We something in the Sunday Times on the weekend. I own my own radio program on Saturday. However, I've been exceptionally nervous all week about doing this. I'm not an expert in education. I have 4 world-leading experts in front of me, and they're going to say, Ken, that's a really silly question. Why are you asking us that? So give me in advance if I do ask questions that you're going, Ken, you really should know better than that. But I think, I'm asking the questions that parents out there or people that know out there are going to be asking. I did also say to them, that in terms of this, I would ask you to stay on screen. If you want to leave your mic open, go ahead. Treat it like a coffee shop. We're going to have a conversation. I brought my coffee with me. I have a cake. I'm not sharing it. Hey, Claire's got her coffee too. So if part of the conversation, if someone says something and you feel you want to jump into the conversation, don't wait for me to bring you in. This is a conversation, people are looking to get the engagement and have the chat in the conversation. As I was just saying there, just in terms of it, we want contributions from people there. So I have 2 pages of questions here I'm going to get through over the next hour. If you have questions that you think are relevant, they're probably better than the questions I have, pop them into the Q&A. If we have a look at them and we think they're part of the conversation, we'll love to put them to the panel for you. So that's enough from me, to be honest. At this stage, if I can ask Elaine to come onto the screen. And then we could ask Elaine just maybe to give her opening themes on that. But because everyone else got an introduction, I better give Elaine an introduction as well. No, you deserve it. So Elaine began teaching in the mid-80s and worked across a variety of settings in both mainstream and special education. Identified autistic at the age of 54. She shared lived experience of mental health, workplace, and activity challenges within the autistic community. Burnout led to an early retirement, but Elaine continues her passion for the autistic voice in education as part of her professional doctorate in education with LSBU, which I had to check out, was the London South Bank University. As a autistic teacher and mum of 2 with 2 amazing autistics, I have one myself. Elaine's research focuses on being an autistic parent and teacher collaboration. Her passion for rights and inclusion saw her play a key role in promoting acceptance in Clonakilty, which for the rest of you, it's a lovely place down in Cork. It's Ireland's first accredited autism-friendly town. So with that, Elaine, you're very welcome. Thank you very much for coming along today. And as I say, our theme is, supporting primary, secondary, and tertiary education settings. What do you think?
Okay, I'll park my imposter syndrome there to one side and get stuck.
Well, I already got
to
mine
be
out
in
there,
such
so.
company. Yeah. Anyhow, no, I'm very interested in sort of like kind of it's in response to Sue's call to arms, if you like, and working with your own experience. And as a parent, you know, as a teacher, I've experienced both sides of the parent-teacher dynamic, if you like, without knowing I was autistic. And I mean, I would put that down a lot, even though I was working in the field of autism, like so many other people, what we learn is deficit-based. And I didn't recognize myself or my children in there in any way, shape or form. So, you know, that gives you then this passion to want, and we want everybody to know everything yesterday because the kids need it, you know, and the struggles are very, very real. So for me, what I want to do is I want to look, like we will accept in every other area of education that partnership with home is a good thing, that a positive partnership has positive results and outcomes for the students. But we don't tend to, if you like, tap into the value of autistic parents. And again, this comes back to what Sue was saying. And like very often what actually happens is the opposite. And a lot of that can be explained through double empathy and monotropism, like you were saying earlier. So say, for example, for me as a parent, if I'm advocating for one of my kids, and the person I'm trying to advocate with doesn't have that sort of neurodivergent radar where they can pick out that a child is, you know, struggling despite this great effort that they're making to fit in, you know. And I have been in the situation where I've been accused of being aggressive. Now, what happens for me and for a lot of autistic parents, again, coming back to this idea of monotropism, is that the school may be happy to dismiss something. They may feel, actually, look, that's nonsense or whatever, and they're happy to let it go. But as an autistic parent, as an autistic person, I can't let go of that until it either makes sense or I have a resolution. And very often what was happening, certainly in my own experience, and I'd be very interested to see how this plays out with my own research, very often what was happening is that, you know, you become that parent, the one they all dread and everything that goes with that. And you know, so we're seen as a hindrance rather than a help in the situation. And like, so really what I want to do and what I'm hoping to do is that by focusing on autistic parents, as opposed to sort of tackling what's going on in the classroom, that I might find a back door, you know what I mean, into doing that little bit of advocacy. And, you know, because the stakes are so high for us, you know, as autistic parents, as autistic professionals. Apart from anything else, like it was quite common for me to go to a school where I would have been considered a very good teacher or an expert in a particular area, whatever. And when it came to my own children, I was totally dismissed. I was being ridiculous. It was nonsense, you know, and that experience happens to so many of the parents. And you're talking about mental health of the parent being affected and also the mental health of your child, because your child is seeing you fighting for them, which is giving them the message that they, you know, there's something wrong and they need to be fought for. And so it's a whole, you know, there's quite a big mess going on there. And I think it's an area like autistic parenting is beginning to emerge in the research right now, but it's an area that hasn't really been tapped into. So yeah, that's me. Leave someone else talk. Sorry.
No,
Yeah.
just, I was going to come to Jess next, but just someone put into the chat, very diplomatically put. I don't think that was quite diplomatic. I thought you were quite clear. Jess, how are you going to set the world to rights?
Well, I'm excited that I'm going after Elaine because as a neurodivergent parent who was a special education teacher in the US and then fighting for my son and his legal rights was one of the most frustrating things that I've ever done. And when you put into context the fact that, well, as an autistic parent, I'm not letting things go until there's a conclusion. And it made so many things click for me as a neurodivergent parent. I never stopped to think like, well, why can't I let this go? I can't let this go because this is what is right. And it's that social like injustice component that I just can't. And what happened with my husband and I is our mental health tanked. And it was then that we said, I guess we are drastically changing our lifestyle so we can put him in a private school because we could not sustain anymore. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm excited about the work that you're doing because it really, I mean, it's resonating with so many people, and even just hearing that was also very healing for me. So thank you.
There's also kind of the issue of like trauma has come up a few times over the day, and Claire was saying how at school they address it, but you know, for parents, we as parents, we've been through all of this, and there's no way we want history repeating itself for our children, you know. So there's that element as well that really needs, I think, to be anyway.
Okay.
Well, so I started studying the transition to higher education for students with disabilities in 2015. My son was diagnosed a few years later. At one point he said to me, "Mommy, do you think your body knew you needed a kid with autism?" I was like, probably, I love you. But so everything that I do is in, like I said, in my presentation, in collaboration with autistic students on our campus, so that we're doing research and making change that is impactful for them. And it's probably due to my neurodivergence, am pretty stubborn in it. And like you said, Elaine, that doesn't always, it's not always well received. And I'm not going to stop. So, so the focus that I have is, how are we creating spaces that are typically run by people who are non-autistic that are inclusive of autistic people's needs, which, if we're being inclusive of, like genuinely inclusive of autistic people's needs, we are then being inclusive of many people's needs, like, you know, like Sue was talking about in her presentation referring to universal design. So I really follow where my students lead me. And the goal is to make change at our university, see how that goes, and then help other universities within the US specifically kind of make these changes. One of the things that one of my students has said to me before is like, she said, "I am so good at advocating. My advocacy skills are strong, and no one listens. No one listens. It doesn't matter how good my advocacy is. No one listens." And so that I carry that with me as part of what the work needs to do, is figuring out how do we, help people listen, right? And so I get excited about these kinds of things because I see so many people who are listening and who are fighting the same fight, and I'm excited.
Okay, well, thanks very much for that. We're going to come to Claire next, just to give that Sue that just a little bit of a break. But Claire, you're in Ireland. I'm in Ireland, and you know, Elaine will say this as well. You know, everybody knows everybody. I know we have a population, but everybody knows everybody. Great presentation earlier. How come we haven't met before?
I don't know, but I know you by reputation, and it's all good. And so,
Okay.
yeah, I'm sure if we kept talking, we'd find a few connections, no doubt. I just want to pick up on what Emily and Jess said there, because it's so interesting, and probably not what I thought I was going to open up with, but that idea of the emotional labor and trauma of advocacy. I'm never going to stop advocating either, but I think people sometimes don't realize the emotional labor involved, especially if you have skin in this game, you know, and my skin being my children, I suppose, and that's what would fuel me to do conferences like this, and kind of put myself out there when I'm in essence a kind of a really private person. It does take a lot out of myself. I can talk about myself, but like what's really good is the green shoots that are starting, and you know, allies like Sue, who does amazing work, you know, do kind of help you kind of go on and kind of continue fighting this good fight. And sometimes I do kind of come home from school and kind of go, why am I trying to put the world to rights? This is too big a task for me. But then you come and you listen to other people who are trying to do similar things, and it really does kind of reignite your passion and remind you why we're trying to kind of get the paradigm shift to happen even quicker, and to happen in a real transformative way, I suppose, Ken.
Okay, I appreciate that. And we can go now to Sue. Bring Sue back into the conversation. Can't
going
hear
to
you.
say that the thing that strikes me listening to everyone speak about the fight and the battle and the trauma is how heartbreaking it is that we can't see each other as assets and allies, right? Like, teachers talk so much, educators at all levels of the system want to do well for all the young people they're educating. I have absolutely no doubt. But sometimes their definition of what doing well looks like is really off. And because of that, then anyone advocating for a different approach or a different kind of outcome is seen as an enemy and a threat and a problem. And then the teacher is pouring energy into resisting the parent or the young person. And the parent is pouring energy into resisting the teacher. When if you asked either of them, what do you want? They would say, I want a good outcome for this young person, right? So I think this is not a solution, obviously, because I don't know how we get to this place. But what we need to do is present ourselves as researchers, parents, neurodivergent staff in the classroom, etc., as allies that are here to help teachers solve a problem that they're facing every day, which is, how do I cater to this neurodiverse classroom or lecture theatre, or, how do I'm just one person, how can I possibly be expected to provide a good education to such a wide range of young people? And the answer is harness the skills and the knowledge and the insight of those young people themselves and of their parents and of your neurodiverse staff room, your neurodivergent colleagues. So we've got to somehow find a way to get ourselves all lined up on the same side, facing in the same direction and working together, because a huge amount of energy and real labor and real trauma is coming out of this fight. Sorry, it's just so cheesy. I've got nothing to say apart from really cheesy platitudes, but that's what I'd like to happen. So to be a little bit more concrete, I suppose in the research that I do, I'm more and more interested now in giving teachers tools that solve a problem they already know they have. I think Leans is an example of that, an attempt at an example of that. I'd like to do more projects like that, where the teacher is saying, oh, thank you so much for giving me this thing, which is just what I wanted. And in doing so, actually uplifting the perspective of the pupil and their parents. That's the goal.
Okay, I had sent you all, I say this is what I'm probably going to do, but I'm actually going to deviate just ever so slightly from that. And again, I've been looking at, supporting primary and tertiary education settings. But one of the things I've been, mulling around my head for the last 24 hours is that word education. We put children into, school at 5, and, then we send them to university or third level, 25 when they come out. What are we expecting to get out at the age of 25? What is the purpose of education? And how does that get applied to people that are neurodiverse? Does anybody want to jump in first? Sue. Sorry, just yours.
So I'm really interested in, I think this is quite Marxist. I'm not a Marx scholar, but anyway, education as a tool of liberation, right? So I think at the moment, our education system is a tool of conformity. It's about trying to make everyone as same-ish as possible, learn the same things in the same way, and to achieve the same sorts of outcomes. And we have a really narrow set of like what good outcomes are, which, have like high earnings and a good university degree, like top of the pile. No one has happiness top of the pile, or a sense of daily fulfillment, or contributing to your community, right? These things aren't top of the pile. And that's one of the reasons why we value being, I don't know, a plumber or a bin man or a cleaner lower down the scale, right? Despite the fact that I suspect that they, like, I mean, just to put it this way, if I go on strike, literally no one notices. And if your bin man goes on strike, it's a big problem right away, right? Like, what's important in our society? Not people like me. So I think that I would like to see, you know, in terms of the purpose of education, I'd like to see the purpose of education to be a way for every person to find their purpose and to see how that purpose fits into their community, to be a valued part of their community, valued for themselves. And I think instead we have an education system that is really about like driving, you know, GDP, driving the economy. It's all just very capitalist. So liberation should be the purpose of education, is my answer.
Is Claire want to jump in there?
Yeah, like I'd echo a lot of what Sue said there. It's lovely to hear that. You know, if you look at education, it is to bring forth what's best from a person, you know, and you know, it's not getting the best so they become a really productive member of society. And I think that's often where education is going. So like, I would love to see somebody at 25 flourishing and thriving, but flourishing and thriving in a way that's authentic to them. So not what we expect or kind of generally kind of value as flourishing and thriving. And part of that will have to be valuing diversity, and that our flourishing and thriving might look very, very different. And, you know, that part of that is looking like, what does a flourishing neurodivergent person look like? It's going to look like loads of different things. And I was delighted to see Robert Chapman and Carell's reading on the end of Sue's slides there. It's a great article about how we need to reconceptualize what flourishing is in life. So I think, you know, really looking at individual strengths and, you know, looking maybe at kind of older theories like something like Maslow, and kind of looking at like self-actualized people, as you know, as they leave the you know, formal education, and hopefully if they leave in and around their 20s, that's not the end of their education, that we have developed lifelong learners that are of value to their society, and that value isn't synonymous with being productive in society. There's lots of other ways to be valuable in society other than being productive, which I think is what can happen quite a lot in education, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Jess seems to be nodding a lot there. Anna's come off mute, so yeah, there you go.
I am a very visual person with my body. Anyone needs any support, and I'm over here like this. I loved the points that Sue brought up, because anytime someone asks these kinds of questions, my brain immediately just goes, we need to burn it all down. And I have a really difficult time articulating what I mean by that. Because we're, you know, especially in America right now, the political climate over here, we're not burning anything. Well, we're burning some things down, but we're not burning any systems down in a way to build them back meaningfully. And so it's really difficult. But speaking from a higher education perspective, because that's the last kind of formal thing people do in education, it can go all the way to doctorates. We have this conversation internally in our program, including our students, all of the time. We have like formal retreats dedicated to what are we doing? What is our purpose? What is our point? What is the goal? And we really kind of have two things that we think about when we think about our supports and the things that our students are asking us for. One, they all want to get through college because that's why they came. College is one of the things that's optional in education. So if you're there, they're like, we want to figure out how to get through this system. And I've never had a student say to me, I would like to get through with a 4.0 because that is what I am supposed to do. And all of my students are like, we just have to figure out how to play this game to get the degree so that we can sustain our livelihood. And so that's what we do. We say, okay, well, how are you going to, How are you going to figure out what this system is asking you to do and use the strengths that you have to jump through the hoops that you need to get the skills to get the job, if that's what you want. And then the other piece that we think about constantly is identity development. So a lot of our students will come in in their first year, and one of the first things we ask them is, do you prefer identity first or person first language? So we know how to refer to you and speak around you. And many students will go, I don't know. But by the end of their 4 years, or 5 or 6, depending on the student, many of them will correct you if you use the language that they're not comfortable with. And so much of what we do is trying to support the students in figuring out who they are and who they want to be. And I think that's one of the beautiful benefits of higher ed, even though every one of my 3 children know very clearly, well, except for the 1-year-old, she doesn't know anything yet, that in our family, you do not need college. College is an option. College is built for neurotypical people right now. Maybe when my 6-year-old hits college, things will be slightly better. But right now in the States, built for neurotypical people. And there are lots of things you can do without a college degree. So I think for us, it's students who want to be there, trying to figure out how to get them through, but also helping them figure out, if they want that level of support, who they are, what do they like, who do they connect with, what does it mean to be happy, and how do you figure that out and get there? So.
Okay, thanks very much. If Elaine, if I just change the question slightly for yourself, forgive me, I'm guessing we're about the same age. So we would have went to the school in the 70s, the 80s. We both have parents of children with autism. Are we burning it down?
Yeah, sorry, yeah, it's
okay.
Tempting, definitely.
Tempting,
it's tempting, okay. Without a doubt, yeah. I think, what is very interesting, I did a little pilot study in terms of my own research, and what I found was that everybody had a positive experience in terms of this parent-teacher collaboration. It's just that it doesn't prevail, So it's not that we don't know how to do this or that this isn't being achieved. It is, but it's just these isolated pockets that we need to kind of join together. So, I suppose I'm being optimistic and hopeful and everything.
I think you're being diplomatic when you say selected pockets. I think there's a whole system change required.
Yeah, you're right. There is, yeah, but there, for me, kind of in terms of my own experience, I think there are people who get it, instinctively get it, and the question is whether they are neurodivergent themselves or not. And then there are people who just cannot see it, what's in front of them on a daily basis, like that. We can say to teachers, right, this particular child needs to retreat, and they'll regulate and they'll come back in their own time, and the teacher might decide after 5 minutes that they're too long in the bathroom. And where are you left then? So yeah, I do agree. There's a lot that needs to be burnt down, particularly within the Irish system, because we have such an emphasis on independence, building independence in such a way that you no longer need your special needs assistant, which is completely crazy. What are we at there? What's wrong with living a full life with a bit of support, with the right supports in place, and having your choices and your freedom? And so yeah, you're right. We probably do need to burn it down. All right.
Well, started. Again, somebody asked the same. I answered much the same myself last week. Somebody asked me that question. But we live in, not saying the real world, and this is what the world that we have. And we're now talking about this primary school, secondary school, 3rd level, or university. So again, we have children going in at 5, 6. Again, it's not an typical, an unusual situation around the world. So, this is their first jump into what's generally a social situation for them. It's the first interface with learning. What should we be doing for children with neurodiverse conditions? What should we be looking to put in? Or should we be looking to identify them? Might be Claire.
Okay, yeah, I think we should be doing a lot, and I think identification is part of it. But first of all, I probably would be looking at the environment, physical environment, sensory environment, and also environment in the sense of relational, the relational environment and the culture of the school. So a school that's going to be inclusive and really value difference and take children where they're at is going to help those young children when they come in. The more we talk about difference and really demonstrate and model that difference is celebrated in our schools, that is going to help. We have to look at really practical things as well, like class sizes. Class sizes are a huge issue in Ireland. Our school buildings are a huge issue in Ireland. I'm teaching over 25 years and I've spent most of that time in prefabs, and they're not span new prefabs either. My GP has, so you've seen pictures of mushrooms on walls. So we there's a lot that needs to happen, and that idea of burning things down sounds very tempting at times, and we need real authentic inclusion. So like not paying lip service to inclusion. The words inclusion and integration are used far too interchangeably in the Irish context, and they're two different things. We need more collaboration with outside professionals. So this is maybe where the identification piece comes in. We need access to our colleagues in outside agencies. The children need access to them as well, and that's not just in terms of assessment, but also in terms of support as well. Teachers are generally quite good at what they do, but there are times where the help of outside professionals would be so helpful. And then I think kind of a pedagogy based on core theories. And when I'm talking about core theories, in relation to neurodivergence, I would be looking at monotropism, I would be looking at double empathy. We have guidance that's come out very recently. Not all of it is bad. However, the theories that are kind of foregrounded in our guidance are deficit-based theories, and that's not good enough. It's just not good enough. We know better, and we should be doing better, and we should be equipping our teachers with better, So yeah, I think a lot of those things would help. And it's not just neurodivergence, neurodivergence specific theories or approaches or concepts as well. Being trauma informed, being a trauma infused organization, and being an organization that wants to create a sense of belonging for everyone is so important.
Okay. Before just coming back to Sue and Jess, I see Lane used the hand raise function, so you get points for being polite.
I didn't, and I changed my mind. No, I'm just thinking in terms of autistic play being a very good example, how we define play and how much we interpret from how a child plays, and they're having a ball, for goodness sake, but it's not seen in that way. It's seen as something that needs to be fixed and corrected and sorted and all the rest. It's just one illustration.
Sue, it's your turn.
I would say, I think a lot of the recommendations I have apply across every educational setting, but thinking about kids coming to school for the first time, I think this is somewhere where universal design is more achievable than it is at other stages on the education journey. And so that's a great thing to be thinking about in your kind of reception class, your P1 class, whatever the first year is called in Ireland. So I think I'd be really thinking about, because you mentioned labeling, right? The fact is, even with a really concerted kind of screening effort or something, we will not know who all the neurodivergent kids are in a class when they're 5 years old. So absolutely categorically, you have to treat the whole class as a neurodiverse class. You can't assume that you can support neurodivergent kids by knowing who they are, that they will come with a little, label on their heads, right? So I think that's a really strong motivator for universal design. And I'm talking about things like, the paint that's on the walls, the displays that are on the walls, the amount of sensory input there is in the classroom, zoning the classroom, something that's often done in early primary school anyway. So you've got different zones for different purposes, and giving children choice and freedom in moving between those zones, and maybe observing the choices that they're making and using that to learn about those kids and their kind of likes and dislikes and their needs and their and their abilities, you know. So I guess I'm talking about really getting off on the right foot in those first weeks and months at school. Claire mentioned sense of belonging. I think that's absolutely crucial, that every child should know from the very beginning how valued they are by their school community and how wanted they are in that school environment. And then the key thing, of course, is to sustain that across their school journey and not lose that sense of belonging, because I do think it is something that children often start out with when they're young, and that starts to get eroded as the school's tolerance for their deviation from this narrow pathway, you know, sort of fades away. So yeah, so those are my thoughts about the primary school years.
Indeed, I have to say, just one of the things that struck me during your, excuse me, did someone rang the doorbell? This is the challenges of working from home. That I nearly fell off my chair laughing when you were saying that teachers in Ireland are generally get one course per diagnosis. And I think that is key to what you were saying there. But I'll go answer the door. Maybe Jess could fill in for 2 minutes and give us her thoughts on, because one of the things I found, just we've been working with the Atlantic School here, and what they're doing is they're now putting in going out talking to primary schools to get the children aware of what neurodiversity is, so when they get to college, they're ready to take part.
So I had 2 thoughts. One of them is gone. It might come back. It was related to something. Oh, I see. It came back. So Sue was just referring to Claire's comment about sense of belonging. And I, in one of the courses that I teach, I had the students watch this video that I just thought was phenomenal. And it was in the secondary setting, which speaks to your point, Sue, about how as students go through the system, they're expected to follow more of these norms, and then they lose a sense of belonging. Where one of their professional development days, the principal of the school put on giant pieces of paper on the wall the name of every single student in that high school. And then teachers had to go around and put a star next to any student that they had a personal connection to. And what ended up happening is that you saw many students who had lots and lots and lots of stars, and then students who had none. And so the principal's, message was, these are the people that you need to be seeing and connecting with. So that was like a really tangible kind of thing that an administrator could do that I was feeling emotional over it, watching it, and I'm not part of that school. But the other thing that I was thinking of was the fact that, at least in the States, when we think about autism and interventions, everyone jumps to, okay, well, what are the evidence-based interventions? What are evidence-based practices? And so many evidence-based practices are not real evidence-based practices. If you actually dig into the studies on them, you start to really see all of the things that they didn't have any significance in improving. And then when you really start thinking, who is like saying what these things that should be improving are, it's not neurodivergent people for the most part. And so I think there's been some back and forth in autism. Sue, were you part of that? No, maybe it wasn't you. There've been back and forth in the journal Autism about this whole concept. I don't think it was you. You would tell me if it was you. But this idea of like really thinking critically about what are our interventions that we're trying to implement for students who are neurodivergent, and who's developing them, and does anyone have any input into the interventions and the way we're studying them that actually is part of this population. So I think in the primary schools, thinking through, what are we doing here? That is more intense support than like a tier 1 of an MTSS model or the universally designed classroom. And where did these things come from? Just having the evidence-based label does not mean that they are safe for our children.
Okay, well, thanks for that. Sue wants to jump back in there.
To say that I just wanted to make an observation about teacher self-efficacy. So we've talked a bit about like burn it all down, right? And I suppose I think that the danger with that is that educators working in the system now who want to make good changes feel a bit disempowered from doing so. And I also think this relates to what Jess was saying about evidence-based practice, because I completely agree with your appraisal of the claims that are made relative to the quality of the literature. I also worry a little bit that every time a new report comes out that points out that we do not have evidence-based practice